The bathroom tiles felt cold against Sienna's cheek. Her vision blurred as waves of pain crashed through her abdomen, each one worse than the last. She tried to call out for Dante, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The metallic taste in her mouth mixed with nausea, so intense she thought she might pass out. "Sienna!" Dante's voice cut through the fog in her mind. His hands were on her shoulders, turning her gently. "Baby, can you hear me? Stay with me." She managed to open her eyes. Her husband's face hovered above her, twisted with panic she'd never seen before. His phone was already pressed to his ear. "Yes, this is an emergency. My wife is pregnant and she just collapsed. She's conscious but barely responsive. Please, we need an ambulance right now." The world tilted sideways. Sienna felt Dante's arms wrap around her, cradling her against his chest. She could hear his heart hammering against her ear, fast and desperate. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, but his voice cracked. "Both of you are going to be okay." But Sienna wasn't sure anymore. For weeks now, something had been wrong, terribly wrong, and deep in her gut, past the pain and the fear, a voice kept screaming that this wasn't just a difficult pregnancy. This was something else entirely. The sirens grew louder outside. Paramedics rushed in, their voices calm and professional as they asked questions Dante answered in fragments. They lifted her onto a stretcher, and she watched the ceiling of their bedroom pass by, then the hallway, then the grand staircase of the Ashford estate. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they wanted you gone? Have you ever smiled at someone across a dinner table, not knowing they were planning your destruction? What if the person trying to end your life wasn't a stranger in a dark alley, but someone who lived under the same roof? Someone who called themselves family? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The vehicle lurched forward, sirens wailing as they raced through Manhattan traffic. A paramedic placed an oxygen mask over Sienna's face, while another checked her vital signs. "Blood pressure is dropping," one of them said. "We need to move faster." Dante gripped her hand so tight it hurt, but Sienna welcomed the pain. It meant she was still here, still fighting. "The baby?" she managed to whisper through the mask. "Is the baby?" "We're monitoring the heartbeat," the paramedic said. "Try to stay calm, Mrs. Ashford. We're almost there." But calm was impossible. Not when her body felt like it was shutting down. Not when every nerve ending screamed in agony. Not when she could see the terror in her husband's eyes, raw and unfiltered. Metropolitan Hospital's emergency bay doors flew open as they arrived. Dr. Hollis, their obstetrician, was already waiting. Her face was grave as she fell into step beside the stretcher. "How long has she been experiencing these symptoms?" Dr. Hollis asked Dante. "They've been getting worse for weeks," Dante said, his voice hoarse. "But tonight, she just collapsed. I found her on the bathroom floor. We need to run a full panel," Dr. Hollis said to the nurses. "Blood work, comprehensive metabolic, and a toxicology screen." That word hung in the air like smoke. Toxicology. Sienna's mind, even through the haze of pain, latched onto it. Why would they need to test for toxins? They wheeled her into an examination room. Bright lights flooded her vision. Hands moved efficiently around her, drawing blood, attaching monitors, checking the fetal heartbeat. Each beep of the machine monitoring their baby was a small relief, proof that their child was still holding on. "Sienna, can you tell me what you've eaten today?" Dr. Hollis asked, leaning close. "The usual," Sienna whispered. "Breakfast, one of the smoothies Cordelia sent over. Lunch was light. Dinner. We were about to have dinner when..." She watched Dr. Hollis exchange a look with one of the nurses. Something flickered in the doctor's expression. Concern? Suspicion? "These smoothies," Dr. Hollis said carefully. "How often do you drink them?" "Every day," Sienna said. "Dante's mother has been sending meals over. Special nutrition for the pregnancy. She said she wanted to help." Another look passed between Dr. Hollis and the nurse. This one lasted longer. Dante stepped closer, his hand finding Sienna's again. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I don't want to jump to conclusions," Dr. Hollis said slowly. "But Mrs. Ashford's symptoms, the severity, the pattern, the fact that standard pregnancy tests haven't shown any abnormalities. It's unusual. The toxicology screen will help us rule out environmental factors." "Environmental factors?" Dante's voice rose. "What are you saying?" Dr. Hollis met his eyes. "I'm saying we need to be thorough. Sometimes pregnant women are exposed to substances that cause severe reactions. Heavy metals, certain chemicals, contaminated food or water. It's protocol in cases like this to check everything." Sienna felt something cold settle in her chest. Contaminated food, the smoothies, the herbal teas, the special meals that arrived every single day from Cordelia's private kitchen. No, that couldn't be right. Her mother-in-law was difficult, yes. Disapproving and cold, absolutely. But poisoning her own grandchild, that was insane, wasn't it? "How long until we get the results?" Dante asked. "The basic blood work will come back within hours," Dr. Hollis said. "The toxicology panel takes longer, usually 48 to 72 hours. But if there's something critical, the lab will flag it immediately. 48 to 72 hours. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of not knowing why her body was betraying her. 3 days of wondering if their baby would survive." A nurse came in with paperwork. "We're admitting her for observation," she said to Dante. "We need to monitor both mother and baby closely." They moved her to a private room on the maternity ward. The walls were painted a soft blue, probably meant to be calming. Didn't work. Nothing could calm the storm raging inside Sienna's mind. Dante pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down, still holding her hand. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Lines of worry creased his forehead, and his eyes were red-rimmed. "I'm scared," Sienna whispered. "Me too," Dante admitted. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But Dr. Hollis is the best. If anyone can figure this out, she can." "What if..." Sienna's voice broke. "What if we lose the baby?" "Don't," Dante said fiercely. "Don't go there. Our baby is strong, just like you. You're both going to get through this." But even as he said it, Sienna could see the fear in his eyes. The same fear that clawed at her own heart. A soft knock interrupted them. A nurse entered with 4 bags. This is going to help with hydration and nausea, she explained as she hooked everything up. Try to get some rest, Mrs. Ashford. Your body needs it. Rest? How could she rest when every cell in her body felt wrong? When her child's life hung in the balance? When questions without answers circled her mind like vultures? The nurse left. Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beep of monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond their door. Dante, Sienna said softly. The smoothies, the meals, they always came from your mother's kitchen, right? Not the main estate kitchen. She felt him tense. Yes, she insisted on using her private chef, said she wanted everything prepared to exact specifications. And I always felt worse after drinking them. The words hung between them, heavy, with implication. Dante opened his mouth, then closed it. She could see him processing, connecting dots he didn't want to connect. That's, he started. My mother wouldn't. But he didn't finish the sentence, because deep down, some part of him was wondering too. Some part of him remembered every cold comment, every disapproving look, every moment of barely concealed hostility toward the woman who had disrupted Cordelia Ashford's carefully laid plans. I sound crazy, Sienna whispered. Don't I? Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. You don't sound crazy. You sound scared. And maybe you have good reason to be. The admission seemed to cost him something. This was his mother they were talking about. The woman who raised him, who taught him everything he knew about business and family legacy. The idea that she could be capable of something so evil. It went against everything he believed about her. But the evidence was there, wasn't it? In every painful symptom Sienna had endured, in every meal delivered with a smile that never reached Cordelia's eyes, in the way his mother's concern had always felt performative rather than genuine. Sienna's eyelids grew heavy. The medication in her 4 was pulling her toward sleep. She fought it, not wanting to let go, but exhaustion won. I'm here, Dante whispered, squeezing her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Sleep, love. I'll be right here when you wake up. As consciousness slipped away, Sienna's last thought was a prayer. Please let the tests show, tell, anything, because not knowing was worse than any truth could be. And somewhere across the city, in a mansion built on old money and older secrets, Cordelia Ashford poured herself a glass of wine and waited. The charity art exhibition had been Sienna's idea. Well, her boss's idea, technically. But Sienna had volunteered to coordinate it. She'd spent 3 weeks arranging everything, securing the venue, coordinating with artists, managing the invitation list for the non-profit organization she worked for. She hadn't expected to meet anyone that night. Certainly not someone who would change her entire life. The gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite, champagne glasses clinking as people admired paintings and sculptures. Sienna moved through the crowd with her clipboard, checking off details, making sure everything ran smoothly. She wore a simple black dress, professional, but nothing fancy. She couldn't afford fancy. That's when she noticed him standing alone in front of a large canvas. Most guests were socializing, networking, doing the things wealthy people did at events like these. But this man stood perfectly still, completely absorbed in the painting before him. The artwork showed 2 figures intertwined against a stormy background. Dark clouds swirled around them. Lightning cracked through angry skies, but the two people held each other close, their forms creating a point of stillness in all that chaos. Sienna found herself drawn to it. To the painting, yes, but also to the man studying it with such focus. He had dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, strong features, and an intensity. The way he looked at the art that suggested he actually cared about what he was seeing. She stepped closer, pretending to adjust something on her clipboard. "What do you see when you look at this?" he asked without turning around. The question caught her off guard. His voice was gentle, genuinely curious, not the performative small talk she'd been hearing all night. Sienna studied the painting again. "I see two people choosing each other despite the chaos around them. Love as an anchor in the storm." Now he turned to look at her. His eyes were striking, a deep brown that seemed to hold warmth and intelligence in equal measure. A slow smile spread across his face. "That's exactly what the artist intended," he said. "Most people just see the darkness. They miss the point entirely, which is that real connection doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It exists despite the storm, not because there isn't one." Something in Sienna's chest tightened. She'd spent her whole life in storms of one kind or another. Financial stress, her mother's exhaustion from working multiple jobs, the constant struggle to make ends meet. She'd never thought about those storms as a backdrop for love, more like obstacles preventing it. "I'm Dante," he said, extending his hand. "Sienna." She shook his hand, noting the warmth of his grip, the calluses that suggested he did more than just sit behind a desk. "Are you here as a donor or an art enthusiast?" "Both, I guess. My company is one of the sponsors, but I actually came for the art." He gestured around the gallery. "These pieces deserve to be seen. The cause deserves support." "Your company?" "Ashford Technologies." Oh. Sienna felt her stomach drop slightly. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Ashford Technologies was one of the biggest tech companies in the country, which meant this man wasn't just wealthy. He was billionaire wealthy. She should have made an excuse and walked away right then. People like Dante Ashford didn't talk to people like Sienna Caldwell. They existed in completely different worlds, and those worlds didn't overlap, except in moments like this, temporary, transactional, meaningless. But he was looking at her like she'd said something fascinating, like he wanted to hear more, like her thoughts actually mattered to him. "Do you work in tech?" he asked. "No, I coordinate programs for the organization hosting tonight. We provide arts education to underserved communities, giving kids access to creativity they wouldn't otherwise have." His smile widened. "That's incredible. Tell me more." And somehow she did. They stood in front of that painting for 20 minutes, then moved to another, then another. Dante asked questions that showed he was actually listening. He didn't check his phone once, didn't scan the room for someone more important to talk to. He treated her like she was the most interesting person at the event. "I should probably get back to work," Sienna finally said, though she didn't want to. "There are 100 things I'm supposed to be managing." "Let me give you my card," Dante said, pulling one from his jacket pocket. "I'd love to hear more about your organization's work Maybe discuss partnership opportunities. Sienna took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. Partnership opportunities? Or coffee, if you'd prefer something less formal. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Coffee sounds less formal. Tomorrow? There's a place in Brooklyn I love. Small, quiet, makes the best espresso in the city. Brooklyn? She raised an eyebrow. You don't strike me as a Brooklyn coffee shop guy. You don't strike me as someone who makes assumptions based on appearances. Too yee. Sienna laughed, surprised by how easy this felt. How natural. Okay, coffee tomorrow. Text me the address. That coffee turned into a 3-hour conversation. They met again 2 days later for a walk through Central Park. Then dinner at a small Italian restaurant where Dante clearly knew the owner. Then a Saturday afternoon at a bookstore where they both got lost in the stacks and emerged with armfuls of recommendations for each other. Sienna kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Dante to reveal that he was playing some kind of game, slumming it with a nonprofit coordinator for entertainment before returning to his real life. But it never happened. Instead, he showed up at her tiny apartment with takeout after she'd had a brutal day at work. He remembered that she liked her coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars. He asked about her mother and genuinely cared about the answer. He listened when she talked about her dreams and never once made her feel small for having them. And slowly, carefully, Sienna let herself believe that maybe this was real. 3 months in, they were walking across the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. The city lights were just starting to flicker on, painting Manhattan in gold and shadow. Dante had been quieter than usual, his hand warm in hers. "I need to tell you something," he said, stopping in the middle of the bridge. Sienna's heart clenched. Here it was, the moment he'd tell her this had been fun, but they were too different, that his family expected him to marry someone from his world. That reality had caught up with whatever fantasy they'd been living. "Okay," she said, bracing herself. Dante turned to face her fully. The setting sun caught his features, making his eyes look almost amber. "I love you. I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you. And I know it's only been 3 months, and people will say it's too soon. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The words hit her like a wave. Relief mixed with joy, mixed with fear, because she felt it too. God, she felt it too. "I love you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I do." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because you're Dante Ashford. Because your world and my world, they're not supposed to mix. Because I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream." He cupped her face in his hands. "This isn't a dream. You're real, and I'm real. And what we have is real. I don't care about our different worlds. I care about you." When he kissed her, Sienna let herself believe him, let herself fall completely into this impossible, beautiful thing they were building together. 6 months later, he proposed. Same bridge, same sunset, but this time he got down on one knee with a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "Marry me," he said simply. "Build a life with me. Let me spend every day proving that you made the right choice." Sienna said yes through happy tears. She said yes, knowing that challenges waited ahead. She said yes, understanding that his family might never accept her. She said yes because despite everything logical and practical, her heart knew this was right. If only she'd known what accepting that ring would cost her. The engagement party happened 2 weeks later at the Ashford estate. Sienna had never seen anything like it. A mansion that looked like it belonged in a period drama, with manicured gardens and staff in formal attire, and more wealth on display than she'd seen in her entire life combined. She wore a cream-colored dress that Dante had insisted on buying her. She'd protested, but he'd been adamant. "You deserve to feel confident tonight," he'd said. "Let me do this for you." The party was already in full swing when they arrived. A string quartet played in the corner. Servers circulated with champagne and appetizers that probably cost more than Sienna's monthly rent. Beautiful people in designer clothes clustered in small groups, their laughter polished and perfect. And in the center of it all stood Cordelia Ashford. Dante's mother was striking. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of beauty that came from excellent genes and even better cosmetic work. Her hair was swept back in an elegant twist, and diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. When her eyes landed on Sienna, they went cold. "Mother?" Dante said, leading Sienna forward. "I'd like you to officially meet Sienna." Cordelia's smile was polite, but didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely. Welcome to our home." "Thank you for hosting this," Sienna said, extending her hand. "Everything is beautiful." Cordelia's handshake was brief and limp. "Of course. Only the best for my son's engagement." The slight emphasis on "my son's" was subtle, but unmistakable. Throughout the evening, Sienna felt Cordelia's eyes on her, watching, judging, finding her lacking in ways Sienna could only imagine. Later, as Sienna stood alone for a moment by the garden windows, she overheard Cordelia talking to a group of her friends. "She's not from our world, Dante," Cordelia was saying, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. "How can he expect her to understand the responsibilities that come with our family name? Perhaps he loves her," one of the women suggested carefully. "Love." Cordelia's laugh was sharp. "Love fades. Compatibility, breeding, shared values. Those are what sustain a marriage in our circles. This girl, she's a charity case herself. What can she possibly bring to this union except dragging down the Ashford reputation?" Each word felt like a slap. Sienna wanted to walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard, but her feet stayed rooted to the spot. Then Dante was there, his voice cutting through with quiet fury. "Mother, that's enough." Cordelia turned, not looking even slightly apologetic. "Dante, I heard what you were saying, and I'm going to say this once. Sienna is going to be my wife. Her character and her heart matter more than any pedigree or social connection. If you can't accept that, then you won't be part of our life." The silence that followed was deafening. Cordelia's face went rigid, but she recovered quickly, smoothing her expression into something neutral. "Of course," she said coolly, "if that's your choice." But Sienna saw the flash of something dangerous in Cordelia's eyes, something that promised this conversation was far from over. As they left the party early, Dante squeezed Sienna's hand. "I'm sorry about her. She'll come around." Sienna wanted to believe him. She really did, but that look in Cordelia's eyes, she couldn't shake it. It wasn't just disapproval. It was calculation, like Cordelia was already planning her next move, in a game Sienna didn't even know she was playing. What would that billionaire mother do to protect what she thought belonged to her? How far would someone like Cordelia Ashford go to remove what she saw as a threat to her family's legacy? Sienna was about to find out, and the answer would nearly destroy them all. The wedding happened on a crisp October afternoon. Cordelia had insisted on organizing everything, and Dante, wanting to believe his mother was trying, had agreed. The ceremony took place at a historic estate upstate, with 500 guests that Sienna barely knew. It was grand and gorgeous, and everything a society wedding should be. It was also nothing like what Sienna had wanted. She'd dreamed of something intimate, close friends and family, in a small venue, personal vows, real emotion instead of performance. But Cordelia had swept in with wedding planners and designers. And suddenly, Sienna's simple dreams had been transformed into a spectacle. "This is what an Ashford wedding looks like," Cordelia had explained with that cold smile. "We have certain standards to maintain." Sienna wore a designer gown that cost more than her mother had earned in a year. She walked down an aisle lined with thousands of white roses while a renowned soprano sang. When she reached the altar and saw Dante's face, full of love and promise, she tried to focus on that instead of the cameras, flashing the whispers from guests critiquing every detail, the weight of expectation crushing down on her shoulders. They honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks of pasta and wine and museums, and making love in ancient cities. For those 2 weeks, Sienna almost forgot about Cordelia and the society, expectations, and the feeling that she'd never quite measure up. But reality waited for them back home. Dante threw himself into work at Ashford Technologies. He'd inherited the company after his father's death 5 years earlier and took his responsibilities seriously. He left early most mornings and came home late most evenings, exhausted but satisfied. Sienna tried to find her place in this new life. She'd quit her nonprofit job. Cordelia had made it clear that the wife of Dante Ashford didn't need to work, should focus on charitable boards and social connections instead. But Sienna couldn't stomach the idea of becoming one of those wives, the ones who spent their days shopping and lunching and gossiping, the ones who treated charity work like a hobby instead of a calling. So she continued volunteering, showed up at soup kitchens and community centers, spent her days actually helping people instead of just writing checks from a distance. Cordelia hated it. A woman of your position should be hosting charity galas, not serving food to the homeless, she'd said one afternoon, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're embarrassing the family name." "I'm helping people who need it," Sienna replied. "That should be what matters. What matters is maintaining our social standing, something you clearly don't understand." The criticism became constant. Sienna's clothes were never quite right. Her hair needed better styling. She didn't know how to properly host a dinner party. She lacked the sophistication required of an Ashford wife. On and on until Sienna sometimes wanted to scream. But she had Dante. At night, in their private quarters of the estate, a suite of rooms that felt like their own world. They could forget about everything else. He'd hold her and listen to her frustrations and remind her why they were doing this. "I know my mother is difficult," he'd say, "but she'll adjust. She just needs time." Sienna wasn't so sure. but she loved Dante enough to keep trying. They'd been married 11 months when Sienna realized her period was late. At first, she didn't think much of it. Stress could affect cycles, but when a week passed, then two, she bought a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately. Sienna sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the test. Her emotions a complicated tangle. Joy because she and Dante had talked about wanting children. Fear because bringing a baby into this complicated family situation felt overwhelming. Hope because maybe a grandchild would finally soften Cordelia's heart. She waited until that evening to tell Dante. They were alone in their sitting room, him reading business reports while she pretended to look at a book. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked up immediately, always attuned to her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think so." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Dante just stared at her. Then his face transformed, shock giving way to pure, unfiltered joy. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "You're serious?" "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she confirmed. And suddenly she was crying and laughing at the same time. Dante kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "This is incredible. You're incredible." "God, Sienna, I love you so much." That night felt like magic. They talked about baby names and nursery colors and what kind of parents they wanted to be. Dante's excitement was infectious, washing away all of Sienna's fears and doubts. "We should tell my mother," Dante said. "She'll be thrilled. A grandchild. That's exactly what this family needs." Sienna wasn't as confident, but she agreed. Maybe Dante was right. Maybe this baby would be the bridge that finally connected her to Cordelia. They arranged dinner at the main house 3 days later. Cordelia had a formal dining room that could seat 30, but tonight it was just the 3 of them at one end of a massive table. Dante could barely contain himself through the appetizer course. Finally, as the main course was being served, he reached over and took Sienna's hand. "Mother, we have news. Sienna is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." Sienna watched Cordelia's face carefully for just a split second, so brief she almost missed it. Something dark flashed across the older woman's features, something cold and calculating that made Sienna's skin prickle. But then Cordelia's expression shifted, smoothing into a polite smile. "How wonderful. An heir to the Ashford fortune. Not congratulations. Not excitement about a grandchild. An heir to the fortune. We're really happy," Dante continued, oblivious to the undercurrent Sienna felt. "We'll probably know the gender in a few weeks, and we're thinking about converting the east bedroom into a nursery." "Of course you must take care of yourself properly," Cordelia interrupted, looking at Sienna. "Pregnancy is delicate, especially for someone not accustomed to proper prenatal care." The dig was subtle, but sharp. Sienna forced a smile. "I have an excellent doctor. Dr. Hollis comes highly recommended." "Yes, but nutrition is so important. Diet, supplements, all of it." Cordelia dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "I'd like to help with that. I'll arrange for my chef to prepare special meals for you, delivered daily, to ensure you're getting exactly what you need." "That's really not necessary," Sienna started. "I insist," Cordelia said firmly. "You're carrying the future of this family. We must ensure you receive the best care possible. Dante squeezed Sienna's hand under the table. That's incredibly generous, Mother. Thank you. Later, in their rooms, Sienna tried to express her concerns. Your mother seemed off tonight. She was probably just surprised, Dante said, already pulling up websites about cribs and strollers on his laptop. But did you see how she wants to help? She's coming around, Sienna. I told you she would. Sienna wanted to argue, wanted to say that Cordelia's offer to help felt less like kindness and more like control. But Dante was so happy, so convinced that the baby would fix everything, that she didn't have the heart to ruin it. The meals started arriving 3 days later. Beautiful presentations of organic vegetables and lean proteins, specially crafted smoothies packed with vitamins and minerals, herbal teas that Cordelia's notes claimed would help with morning sickness. At first, Sienna was touched. Maybe she had misjudged. Maybe Cordelia was genuinely trying to be supportive. She drank the smoothies every morning, ate the carefully prepared lunches, sipped the herbal teas throughout the day, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she started feeling worse. The morning sickness that should have been easing as she entered her second trimester instead intensified. She felt constantly exhausted, like her body was fighting some invisible battle. Her stomach cramped in ways that didn't feel normal. Some mornings, she could barely lift her head from the pillow. Maybe it's just a difficult pregnancy, Dante suggested when she mentioned it. Some women have a harder time than others. Dr. Hollis ran tests. Everything came back normal. Baby's heartbeat strong. All the standard markers looking healthy. Try to rest more, the doctor advised. Reduce stress where you can. Some women simply react more strongly to the hormonal changes. But Sienna noticed a pattern. The symptoms always seemed worse after consuming what Cordelia sent over. The smoothies especially left her feeling nauseous and dizzy within an hour of drinking them. She mentioned it to Dante one evening. I think maybe the foods your mother is sending are too rich for my stomach right now. I feel worse after eating them. The rich foods might be too heavy, Dante agreed. Why don't you try simpler meals for a few days? See if that helps. So Sienna stopped drinking the smoothies, ate simple toast and fruit instead of the elaborate meals. And for 3 days, she felt marginally better. Not great, but the symptoms weren't as severe. Then Cordelia showed up. She arrived at their door one afternoon, her expression one of wounded concern. I heard you're not eating the meals I've been arranging for you. They were making me feel sick, Sienna said carefully. Sick? Cordelia's eyebrows rose, but they're prepared by a professional chef, using the highest quality organic ingredients. I've been coordinating with a nutritionist to ensure every meal contains exactly what a pregnant woman needs. I'm sure they're wonderful, but my stomach. Do you know how much effort goes into this? Cordelia's voice took on an edge. I'm trying to help you, Sienna. Trying to ensure my grandchild gets proper nutrition despite your limitations. And this is how you repay that effort. Guilt washed over Sienna. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the sickness was just pregnancy, and she was looking for someone to blame. Maybe Cordelia really was trying to help in her own controlling way. I'm sorry, Sienna heard herself say. You're right. I'll start eating them again. Cordelia's smile was sharp and satisfied. Good. I'll make sure the deliveries continue. After all, you're carrying something precious. We can't be too careful." After she left, Sienna stood in their empty kitchen and wondered why those words, "We can't be too careful," sounded less like concern and more like a threat. But she pushed the thought away. That was crazy thinking, paranoid thinking. Her mother-in-law wasn't trying to hurt her. That was something from a psychological thriller, not real life. Real life was resuming the smoothies and meals. Real life was feeling worse again, but telling herself it was normal pregnancy symptoms. Real life was ignoring the voice in her head that screamed something was wrong. What Sienna didn't know, couldn't know, was that in Cordelia's private kitchen, each smoothie and tea was carefully prepared with an extra ingredient, something tasteless and odorless that wouldn't show up on standard pregnancy tests, something that would make Sienna sick enough to miscarry while appearing to be natural complications. Cordelia had decided. The pregnancy had to end. This common girl who had trapped her son wouldn't be allowed to cement her place in the family by producing an heir. The baby had to go. And if Sienna suffered in the process, well, some lessons needed to be painful. If this story is gripping you, show some love with a like, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever ignored your gut instinct and regretted it? Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these truths. Week by week, Sienna's body betrayed her. The fatigue grew from annoying to debilitating. Some mornings, getting dressed felt like climbing a mountain. The nausea came in waves so intense she'd spend hours curled up on the bathroom floor, too weak to move. Dante noticed. How could he not? His vibrant wife was fading before his eyes. "I'm calling Dr. Hollis again," he announced after finding Sienna barely conscious on their bedroom floor one afternoon. "This isn't normal." Dr. Hollis scheduled more appointments, drew more blood, ran more tests. Each time, the results came back frustratingly normal. Baby's heartbeat strong. No signs of preeclampsia or gestational diabetes or any of the common pregnancy complications. "Your symptoms are concerning," Dr. Hollis admitted during one visit. "But without any clear indicators of what's causing them, I can only treat them symptomatically. More rest, more fluids, anti-nausea medication if needed." But nothing helped. The medication barely touched the nausea. Rest didn't restore her energy. And day by day, Sienna felt herself slipping further from the person she used to be. The worst part was the pattern she couldn't ignore anymore. Every time she drank one of Cordelia's smoothies or teas, the symptoms intensified within hours. The cramping would start, sharp and vicious in her abdomen. The dizziness would leave her gripping furniture just to stay upright. She tried to mention it to Dante again. "I really think there's something in those drinks." "Sienna." He took her hands gently. "I know you're scared. I know feeling this awful makes you want to find a reason, something to blame. But my mother isn't trying to hurt you. She's difficult and controlling, yes, but she wouldn't poison her own grandchild." That's insane thinking. And maybe it was. Maybe Sienna's mind was creating connections that didn't exist because the alternative, that pregnancy was simply this terrible for her, was too depressing to accept. So she kept drinking the smoothies, kept forcing down the meals, kept telling herself the constant nausea and pain were normal, even though everything in her screamed otherwise. Meanwhile, in her private kitchen, Cordelia continued her careful work. She'd researched extensively before choosing thallium. It was a heavy metal, difficult to detect, with symptoms that could easily be mistaken for severe pregnancy complications. In small doses administered consistently, it would make Sienna miserable without immediately killing her. The goal wasn't murder. After all, too messy, too suspicious. The goal was a miscarriage that would look natural. Tragic, but not criminal. These things happened all the time, especially with first pregnancies. No one would think to look deeper. And if Sienna became so ill in the process that she needed extended medical care afterward, if the trauma broke her marriage to Dante, well, that would be an unfortunate but acceptable outcome. Cordelia measured each dose carefully. Too much, and Sienna would die, triggering an investigation. Too little, and she might carry to term. It had to be perfect, just enough to destroy the pregnancy while maintaining plausible deniability. She added the tasteless substance to the morning smoothies, mixed it into the herbal teas, sometimes even dusted it onto fresh fruit or into soups. Her chef knew to never question the special supplements Mrs. Ashford personally added to each preparation. "You're being so attentive to the pregnancy," the chef commented once. Mrs. Ashford must feel very for... "I take family responsibility seriously," Cordelia replied coolly. "Now remember, these meals go directly to her quarters. No one else touches them." The chef nodded, oblivious to the true nature of those supplements. Back in their rooms, Sienna tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She'd planned to work on the nursery, to prepare for their baby's arrival with excitement and joy. Instead, most days, she could barely get out of bed. Dante did everything he could. He reduced his hours at work, sometimes not going in at all. He held her hair when she vomited, brought her water and crackers, and anything she thought she might be able to keep down. Researched pregnancy complications obsessively, looking for answers doctors couldn't provide. "Tell me what to do," he'd whisper desperately. "Tell me how to make this better." "You can't," Sienna would reply, her voice weak. "Just stay with me. That's all I need." And he did. He held her through the worst of it, his own fear carefully hidden so she wouldn't see how terrified he was of losing her, of losing their baby, of watching helplessly while something invisible destroyed the woman he loved. One evening, about 6 weeks into the mysterious illness, Sienna managed to sit up in bed and actually eat a few bites of plain rice. Dante sat beside her, one hand protectively on her small baby bump. "I felt the baby move today," Sienna said softly. "Just little flutters, but definitely movement." Dante's face lit up. "Really? That's amazing. That means everything is okay, right? If the baby's moving." "I think so." Dr. Hollis said, "Movement is a good sign." They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking the same thought. If the baby was okay, why did Sienna feel so terrible? "Maybe after the second trimester," Dante said hopefully. "They say the third trimester is usually better. Maybe you just need to get through these next few weeks." Sienna wanted to believe him, wanted to think that relief waited just around the corner. But something in her gut, that voice she'd been ignoring for weeks now, whispered that things were going to get worse before they got better. If they got better at all. That night, Cordelia made her next delivery personally. She arrived at their door with a basket containing fresh smoothies and a special tea blend. "I heard you were feeling a bit better today," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I thought this might help maintain your progress. The tea is particularly good for energy." Sienna accepted the basket reluctantly. "Thank you. You really should drink the tea tonight," Cordelia insisted. "Before bed. It will help you sleep better." After she left, Sienna stared at the tea. Every instinct she had screamed not to drink it, but Dante was looking at her with such hope that his mother was helping. Things were improving, that their family could somehow work despite everything. She couldn't bear to take that hope away from him. So that night, Sienna drank the tea. Within 2 hours, the cramps started, worse than they'd ever been before. Pain ripped through her abdomen, sharp and relentless. She tried to get to the bathroom, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She hit the floor hard. "Dante!" She tried to call out, but it came out as barely a whisper. The room spun, her vision blurred. She could feel something wet and warm between her legs, and panic flooded through her. The baby. Something was wrong with the baby. She tried to crawl toward the bedroom door, but her arms wouldn't support her weight. The pain intensified, stealing her breath, her vision, her consciousness. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the bathroom tiles, cold against her cheek. And somewhere in the mansion, Cordelia poured herself a glass of wine and smiled. Dante found her minutes later. He'd gone downstairs to grab something from his office and returned to find the bedroom door open, and Sienna collapsed on the bathroom floor. "Sienna!" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he turned her over. She was conscious, but barely, her eyes unfocused. "Baby, can you hear me? Talk to me. Hurts," she managed to whisper. "Dante, it hurts so much." He was already reaching for his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "Yes, this is an emergency. My wife is pregnant, and she collapsed. She's barely conscious, and there's—" He looked down and saw blood. Not a lot, but enough to send his heart into his throat. "There's bleeding. Please send someone now." The operator's voice was calm and professional, walking him through what to do while they waited for the ambulance. "Keep her comfortable. Make sure she's breathing. Don't try to move her too much." Dante did exactly as instructed, all while holding Sienna's hand and telling her over and over that help was coming, that she was going to be okay, that their baby was going to be okay. He had to believe it, had to make it true through sheer force of will. The sirens seemed to take forever. In reality, the ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Paramedics rushed in with equipment and calm expertise, asking questions while they worked. "How far along is she?" 18 weeks. Almost 19. "Any complications in the pregnancy so far?" "She's been sick. Really sick for weeks. Doctors can't figure out why. Any history of miscarriage or pregnancy loss?" "No. This is her first pregnancy." They lifted Sienna onto a stretcher. One paramedic started in 4, while another checked her vital signs. Their expressions were professionally neutral, but Dante caught the concerned look they exchanged. "Blood pressure's dropping," one of them said quietly. "We need to move." The ride to Metropolitan Hospital blurred together. Dante sat beside the stretcher, holding Sienna's hand, while machines beeped and paramedics communicated with the hospital in medical shorthand. He didn't understand. Sienna's eyes fluttered open at one point. "The baby," she whispered, "is the baby." "They're checking," Dante said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just focus on staying with me, okay? Don't think about anything else." "I should have listened," she said, her words slightly slurred. "Should have trusted my gut. The smoothies. The tea. I knew something was wrong." "Don't talk like that. Save your strength." But even as he said it, something cold settled in Dante's chest. The smoothies, the tea, all the special meals his mother had been preparing so carefully, so consistently. No, he pushed the thought away. Sienna was delirious from pain and fear. She wasn't thinking clearly. The hospital came into view. Emergency bay doors flew open as they arrived, and Dr. Hollis was already there waiting. "Severe abdominal pain, bleeding, altered mental status," one paramedic reported. "BP 90/60 and dropping. Started 4 fluids en route." "Let's get her into room 3, Dr. Hollis directed. To Dante, "I need you to wait in the family room. We'll update you as soon as we can." "I'm not leaving her." "Mr. Ashford." "Doctor." Hollis's tone was firm but not unkind. "Let us do our job. The best thing you can do, let us do our job. The best thing you can do for your wife and baby right now is let us work." It went against every instinct Dante had, but he nodded and watched them wheel Sienna through doors he couldn't follow her past. The family waiting room was small and sterile. Dante paced, unable to sit. His mind raced through everything that had happened over the past weeks. Sienna's mysterious illness, the medications that didn't help, the pattern she'd noticed with his mother's deliveries. His phone buzzed. His mother calling. Dante stared at the screen, something twisted and ugly taking root in his chest. He let it go to voicemail. 30 minutes passed. 45. An hour. Each minute felt like eternities stacked on top of each other. Finally, Dr. Hollis emerged. Her expression was grave, but not devastated. Dante didn't know if that was good or bad. "Your wife is stable," she said immediately, "and the baby's heartbeat is still strong." Dante's legs nearly gave out with relief. "They're okay for now. But, Mr. Ashford, I need to discuss something serious with you." She gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down." He sat, his body moving on autopilot. Dr. Hollis pulled out a folder thick with papers. "When your wife came in tonight with acute symptoms, I ordered a comprehensive panel of tests, blood work, metabolic panel, and a full toxicology screen." "Toxicology?" The word felt heavy in his mouth. "Standard protocol when someone presents with symptoms we can't explain through normal means." "Doctor?" Hollis opened the folder, pulling out several pages covered in medical terminology and numbers. The results came back flagged. "Mr. Ashford, your wife has significant levels of thallium in her system." Thallium? He'd heard the word before, but couldn't place it. "What is that?" It's a toxic heavy metal. It's used in some industrial processes, but it's not something anyone encounters accidentally. The levels we're seeing indicate consistent exposure over several weeks. The room tilted. Dante gripped the arms of his chair. I don't understand. How could she be exposed to that? Dr. Hollis's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held something that looked like sympathy mixed with suspicion. That's what makes this concerning. Thallium poisoning at these levels doesn't happen by chance. It requires repeated, intentional administration. The words hung in the air between them. Intentional. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone has been poisoning your wife, Dr. Hollis said gently. Systematically. Over weeks. The symptoms she's been experiencing, the nausea, fatigue, abdominal pain, are all consistent with thallium poisoning. If we hadn't caught this when we did, if she hadn't collapsed tonight, she trailed off, letting the implication hang. She could have died, Dante finished, his voice hollow. Yes, or lost the baby, or both. The floor seemed to drop out from under him. Poisoned? Sienna had been poisoned. Someone had deliberately given her something toxic, watching her suffer, waiting for her to miscarry or worse. And suddenly, Sienna's paranoid-sounding concerns didn't seem paranoid at all. The smoothies that made her sick, the teas that preceded her worst symptoms, the carefully controlled food deliveries his mother had insisted on. Oh, God, Dante whispered. Oh, God, no. Mr. Ashford? Doc. Hollis leaned forward. Do you know how your wife might have been exposed? He wanted to lie, wanted to say he had no idea, that this made no sense, that surely there was some other explanation. But the evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. My mother, he said, the words feeling like they were being torn from his throat. She's been sending special meals to Sienna every day. Smoothies, teas, prepared food. She insisted on it after we announced the pregnancy. Dr. Hollis's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Understanding. Confirmation of what she'd probably already suspected. I need to report this to the authorities, she said. This is attempted murder, Mr. Ashford. Possibly attempted murder of 2 people. I know, Dante's voice cracked. I know you do. But Dr. Hollis, is there any chance I'm wrong? Anyway, this could be an accident, or contamination, or something else. She looked at him with something like pity. The thallium levels are too consistent for contamination. There's no accidental way to ingest this substance repeatedly over weeks. I'm sorry. Can I see my wife? She's resting. We've started chelation therapy to remove the thallium from her system. With treatment, she should recover fully. The baby appears to have been somewhat protected by the placenta, but we'll monitor closely. But they'll be okay? He needed to hear it again. They should be. You got her here in time. Doctor? Hollis stood. I'll have someone take you to her room. But, Mr. Ashford, the police will want to speak with you, and they'll need access to anything your mother sent over for your wife to consume. Dante nodded numbly. His mother, the woman who raised him, who taught him about business and family and responsibility, she'd tried to kill his wife and child. The realization didn't feel real. Felt like something from a nightmare. He'd wake up from any moment. But as he followed a nurse down the corridor toward Sienna's room, fluorescent lights, bright and harsh overhead, he knew this was real. His mother had poisoned Sienna, systematically, deliberately, with full knowledge of what she was doing. And now he had to figure out what came next. How to protect his family while watching his mother face justice for trying to destroy it. The nurse stopped outside a room. Through the window, Dante could see Sienna lying in bed, hooked up to monitors and 4S. She looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, nothing like the strong woman he'd fallen in love with. But she was alive. Their baby was alive. That was what mattered. He opened the door and stepped inside, ready to tell his wife the horrible truth she'd known all along, that the person who should have loved her had been trying to kill her instead. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Sienna's eyes were closed, her face pale against the white pillow. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking her heartbeat and the baby's. Vierte! Line ran into her arm, pumping fluids and chelation medication to flush the poison from her system. Dante pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. He rubbed them gently, trying to bring warmth back. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion crossed her features, then recognition, then memory. Her free hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The baby? Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Still strong, still fighting, just like you. Dante's throat tightened. Dr. Hollis says you both should be okay. They're treating you now. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. I told you something was wrong. I told you, and you didn't believe me. The accusation hit harder than any physical blow could have. Because she was right. She'd tried to warn him, and he'd dismissed her concerns as pregnancy, paranoia. He'd let his mother continue poisoning his wife because he couldn't accept what his own family was capable of. I'm so sorry, Dante said, his own tears falling now. You were right about everything. The tests came back. You have thallium in your system. Someone's been poisoning you. He watched her face, watched shock and vindication and horror play across her features in quick succession. Your mother, she said. Wasn't a question. The police are being called. They'll investigate, but he couldn't finish. Couldn't say out loud what they both already knew. She tried to kill our baby. Sienna's voice broke on the last word. She tried to kill me. Though, how could she? How could anyone do that? Dante had no answer. He'd been asking himself the same question since Dr. Hollis had shown him the test results. His mother had raised him, had taught him right from wrong, had preached about family loyalty and the importance of the Ashford name, and then she'd tried to murder her own grandchild. I should have protected you, Dante said. I should have seen it. Should have listened when you said something was wrong. Sienna squeezed his hand weakly. You couldn't have known. Nobody expects their own mother to be a monster. But that's exactly what Cordelia was. A monster in designer clothes, with a smile that never reached her eyes. A monster who valued power and control more than human life. A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Hollis entered, followed by a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Detective Morris Keller with the NYPD. I'm sorry to intrude, Detective Keller said. His voice was calm and professional, but I need to ask some questions while the details are fresh. He was in his 50s, with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. He pulled out a notepad and sat in the chair opposite Dante. "Mrs. Ashford, can you tell me about the food and beverages you've been consuming? Specifically anything that came from outside sources." Sienna took a breath, then explained. "The daily deliveries from Cordelia's private kitchen. The smoothies every morning, the herbal teas throughout the day, the carefully prepared meals. How her symptoms always worsened after consuming them. How she'd tried to stop, but had been guilted into continuing." Detective Keller wrote everything down, his pen moving steadily across the page. "And these deliveries, they came directly to your living quarters?" "Yes, always in sealed containers with instructions on when to consume everything." "Did anyone else eat or drink from these deliveries?" "No. They were specifically portioned for me. Cordelia said they were tailored for my pregnancy needs." The detective turned to Dante. "Mr. Ashford, I'll need access to your estate, specifically to your mother's private kitchen and any remaining food or beverage items that were prepared for your wife." "Whatever you need," Dante said immediately. "I'll call ahead and make sure you have full access. I'll also need to speak with your mother." Dante's jaw tightened. "She'll lawyer up immediately. The Ashfords have a whole firm on retainer. Let her. We have medical evidence, a clear pattern of behavior, and a victim who can testify to the systematic poisoning. The lawyers can't make the facts disappear." After Detective Keller left to begin securing warrants, Dr. Hollis checked Sienna's vitals again. "The chelation therapy is working. Your levels are already dropping. You'll need to stay here for at least 48 hours for monitoring, but I'm optimistic about your recovery." "And the baby?" Sienna asked, her hand still protectively on her stomach. "The placenta provided some protection from the poison. We'll do regular ultrasounds to monitor development, but so far, everything looks good." "Doll!" Hollis's expression softened. "You're both fighters. That's in your favor." After the doctor left, silence filled the room. Dante sat with his head in his hands, the weight of everything crushing down on him. His mother had done this, his own mother, the woman who'd held him when he cried as a child, who'd taught him to read, who'd attended every school play and soccer game. That same woman had systematically poisoned his pregnant wife. "What are you thinking?" Sienna asked softly. "That I don't know her at all. The woman who raised me. I thought I knew who she was. But that person couldn't do something like this. Maybe she could. Maybe we just didn't want to see it." Dante looked up. "What do mean?" "All the little cruelties, the constant criticism, the way she tried to control everything. Those were warnings, Dante. We just didn't recognize them as dangerous until the danger became life-threatening. She white. The signs had been there all along. He just made excuses, told himself it was his mother's difficult personality, her high standards, her protective nature. He'd normalized behavior that should have set off every alarm bell. His phone buzzed, his mother calling again. Dante stared at the screen, rage and grief warring inside him. He answered. "Dante, thank God. I heard Sienna was rushed to the hospital. Is the baby?" "Don't." His voice came out flat and cold. "Don't pretend to care about the baby you tried to kill." Silence on the other end. "Then I don't know what you're talking about." "Thallium poisoning. The doctors found it in Sienna's blood work. Weeks of consistent exposure through food and beverages. Food and beverages you insisted on preparing and delivering personally. More silence. Dante could almost hear her calculating her next move. "That's absurd," Cordelia finally said, her voice taking on the imperious tone she used when challenged. "If there's contamination, it must have come from somewhere else. Perhaps that nonprofit she works at, with all those unsanitary—" "Stop lying." Dante's grip on the phone tightened. "The police are coming. They have warrants. They're going to search your kitchen and test everything you sent to Sienna. Do you understand? It's over." "Dante, listen to me." "You listen. You tried to murder my wife. You tried to kill my child, your own grandchild. And for what? Because Sienna didn't come from the right family? Because she threatened your control over me?" "She doesn't belong in our world," Cordelia said, and for the first time her mask cracked. Her voice turned sharp and bitter. "I worked too hard building this family's legacy to watch you throw it away on some charity worker who doesn't understand what we are." "What we are?" Dante's laugh was harsh and broken. "We're nothing, Mother. We're just people with money. That's it. And you tried to commit murder to protect that. I was protecting you, protecting our family name. Once she lost the baby, you could have gotten an annulment. Found someone appropriate. Someone who could—" "I'm done." Dante cut her off. "Don't call me again. Don't try to contact me or Sienna. When the police come, you tell them whatever you want. But you and I, we're finished." He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. Sienna watched him with sad eyes. "She admitted it," he said numbly. "Not directly, but she admitted it. Said she was protecting me. Protecting the family name." "I'm sorry," Sienna whispered. "I know she's your mother. I know this has to be destroying you." Dante moved back to her bedside and took her hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. This is on her. All of it." They sat in silence as the hospital sounds filtered through the closed door. Footsteps in the hallway, muted conversations, the distant ding of elevators. Normal sounds in a world that had just revealed itself to be anything but normal. "What happens now?" Sienna asked. Now we let the police do their job. We focus on getting you and the baby healthy. And we figure out how to move forward from this." "Can we? Move forward, I mean. After something like this?" Dante looked at his wife, pale and weak, but still here, still fighting. He thought about their baby, still growing, despite someone's best efforts to end that life. He thought about the future they'd planned, the family they wanted to build. "Yes," he said firmly, "we can. We will. Because that's what she didn't count on. That our love is stronger than her hate. That we won't let her destroy what we've built." Sienna's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time they looked less like grief and more like relief. Like maybe, just maybe, they could survive this after all. Outside the hospital, across the city, police cars pulled up to the Ashford estate. Detective Keller and his team had their warrants. They had their evidence bags and their forensic kits. They had a case to build against one of the wealthiest women in Manhattan. And in her study, Cordelia Ashford poured herself another glass of wine and prepared for war, because she hadn't built an empire by backing down when challenged. She had lawyers and money and connections. But what she didn't have, what she'd never really had, was love. Real love that protected instead of controlled. Real family that supported instead of manipulated. And in the end, that would be the difference between justice and getting away with attempted murder. The game was just beginning, but for the first time, Cordelia wasn't holding all the cards. Detective Keller stood in Cordelia's private kitchen at 3 in the 2 morning, watching forensic technicians photograph and bag evidence. The space was pristine, all stainless steel and marble countertops, equipment that cost more than most people earned in a year. Everything perfectly organized and controlled, just like the woman who used it. "Detective, you need to see this." One of the techs called him over to a cabinet near the industrial refrigerator. She'd removed a false bottom from one of the drawers. Inside was a small glass container. The powder inside looked harmless. White, crystalline, like sugar or salt. "Thallium sulfate," the tech said, reading from a label partially hidden beneath the container. "This is medical grade. Highly regulated. You can't just buy this at a pharmacy." Detective Keller pulled on gloves and carefully lifted the container into an evidence bag. "How much is here?" "Enough to kill someone several times over if administered all at once, but in small doses over weeks." The tech's expression was grim. "Enough to cause exactly what Mrs. Sienna Ashford has been experiencing." "Bag everything. I want every container, every utensil, every scrap of food in this kitchen tested." The team worked methodically. They found smoothie mixes with ingredient lists that didn't match what was actually in them. Herbal tea blends with suspicious residue. A notebook hidden in another drawer with dates and measurements that looked like dosing schedules. Cordelia Ashford had kept records, like she was running a science experiment instead of attempting murder. "She's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant," one officer muttered. "Arrogant," Detective Keller said. She never thought she'd get caught. Never thought anyone would question her. They found the chef next, a woman named Rosa, who'd worked for the Ashfords for 15 years. She was sobbing in the servants' quarters when they knocked on her door at 4 in the morning. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I swear I didn't know what she was giving me to add to the food." Detective Keller sat across from her in the estate's formal dining room, his notepad open. "Tell me exactly what Mrs. Ashford asked you to do." Rosa twisted her hands in her lap. She said the young Mrs. Ashford needed special supplements for her pregnancy, that she'd researched the best nutrition and wanted to make sure everything was perfect. She'd give me these small containers, powders, sometimes liquids, and tell me exactly when and how to add them to the meals. "Did you question it?" "At first, yes. I asked to see the labels to know what I was adding. She said they were custom compounds from a specialist, that I wouldn't understand the medical terminology anyway." Rosa's voice broke. "I trusted her. She's been my employer for 15 years. Why would she lie?" "How often did she personally oversee the meal preparations?" "Every single time. She'd watch me add the supplements, check that I'd measured correctly. She was very particular about it." "And the deliveries to Mr. and Mrs. Ashford's quarters?" "Always sealed." Mrs. Cordelia insisted on delivering them herself sometimes. Other times, she'd have me do it, but always with strict instructions that no one else touch the food. Detective Keller made notes while Rosa cried. She wasn't a suspect, just another person Cordelia had manipulated, used, turned into an unwitting accomplice in attempted murder. By dawn, they had enough evidence to make an arrest. The thallium container alone was damning. The dosing schedule she'd kept was even worse. Clear premeditation, careful, planning, systematic poisoning, documented in her own handwriting. "She's in her study," one of the officers reported. "Been there all night. Says she won't speak without her lawyer present. Lawyer can meet us at the station," Detective Keller said. "Let's go." They found Cordelia exactly where the officer said, sitting at her desk, perfectly composed, despite the police presence throughout her home. She wore a silk robe, and her hair was styled, even at this early hour, like she'd been expecting them. "Mrs. Cordelia Ashford, you're under arrest for attempted murder and assault." Detective Keller read her rights, while two officers moved forward with handcuffs. "This is absurd," Cordelia said, her voice cold. "I haven't done anything wrong. If there's contamination in something I prepared, it must have been accidental. The thallium we found in your kitchen wasn't accidental. The dosing schedule we found in your handwriting wasn't accidental. And the systematic poisoning of your pregnant daughter-in-law over several weeks definitely wasn't accidental." For just a moment, something flickered in Cordelia's eyes. Not remorse, not shame, anger, fury at being caught, at losing control, at having her plans exposed. "I want my lawyer," she said flatly. "You'll have plenty of time to call them from the station." They led her out of her own mansion, in handcuffs. Staff members watched from doorways and windows, shocked and confused. The woman who'd ruled this estate with an iron fist for decades was being walked to a police car like a common criminal, because that's exactly what she was. Dante stood at his bedroom window and watched the police cars pull away, red and blue lights flashing in the pre-dawn darkness. His mother was in one of those cars, handcuffed, arrested, on her way to jail. He should feel something, satisfaction maybe, or vindication. Instead, he just felt hollow, empty, like something fundamental had been ripped away, leaving nothing but a gaping wound. His phone buzzed with messages. Family friends who'd heard, business associates, reporters already sniffing out the story. He ignored them all. At the hospital, Sienna was sleeping. The chelation therapy was working. Her color was better. The cramping had stopped. Their baby's heartbeat remained strong and steady on the monitors. They were going to survive this, both of them. But survival came at a cost. The illusion of family, the belief that blood meant loyalty, the trust that people who claimed to love you actually meant it. All of that was gone now, shattered like glass against concrete. Dante's assistant arrived at 8 with fresh clothes and coffee. "The media is camping outside the hospital," she warned. "The estate. This is going to be everywhere by noon." "Let it be everywhere," Dante said tiredly. "Maybe other people need to know that abuse doesn't always look like what they think it does. That monsters sometimes wear pearls and live in mansions." By midday, the story had indeed exploded across every news outlet. Billionaire matriarch arrested for poisoning pregnant daughter-in-law. Ashford family scandal rocks. Manhattan elite. Shocking toxicology tests expose a attempted murder plot. The details were salacious enough to dominate headlines for weeks. Wealth, betrayal, pregnancy, poison. It had everything people couldn't look away from. But for Dante and Sienna, it wasn't entertainment. It was their life, their trauma, their family disintegrating in real time for the world to watch and judge and dissect. "Turn off the TV," Sienna said when Dante visited that afternoon. She looked stronger, more alert. "I don't want to see it. Any of it." He clicked off the screen, showing yet another news analysis of the case. "How are you feeling? Physically?" "Better. Dr. Hollis says I can probably go home in another day or two." She paused. "Emotionally? I don't know yet." Dante sat on the edge of her bed. "I keep thinking about all the times she criticized you, all the little comments about not being from our world, not understanding our responsibilities. I thought it was just her being difficult. But it was more than that, wasn't it? It was hate," Sienna said quietly. "Pure, calculated hate. And we both ignored the signs because we wanted to believe family couldn't really be that cruel. I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing. You didn't do this. She did. And now she has to face the consequences. But would she? Cordelia had resources most criminals could only dream of. The best lawyers money could buy. Connections in places that mattered. A lifetime of wielding power and influence. As if reading his thoughts, Sienna squeezed his hand. The evidence is there. The poison was in her kitchen. The dosing schedule was in her handwriting. My medical records show consistent poisoning over weeks. She can't make that disappear, no matter how expensive her lawyers are. I hope you're right. I know I'm right, because this time, the truth is on our side. And truth has a way of winning eventually." Dante wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that justice would prevail, that his mother would face real consequences for what she'd done. But he'd grown up in a world where money insulated people from accountability, where the right lawyers could twist any truth into reasonable doubt. Still, he nodded, because right now, hope was all they had. Hope that the system would work. Hope that their baby would continue growing healthy and strong. Hope that they could build something good from the ashes of this nightmare. Outside Sienna's hospital room, the world kept spinning. News vans camped outside. Reporters called anyone who'd ever known the Ashfords. Social media exploded with theories and opinions and judgment. But inside that room, two people held hands and chose to keep fighting. For each other, for their unborn child, for a future where love meant protection instead of poison. And across the city, in a holding cell at the Manhattan Detention Center, Cordelia Ashford sat alone and refused to admit she'd done anything wrong, even to herself, especially to herself, because admitting it would mean confronting who she really was, and that truth was too terrible to face. The arraignment happened 72 hours after Cordelia's arrest. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious onlookers, family friends come to show support or witness the downfall. Dante sat in the front row, deliberately choosing not to sit on his mother's side of the aisle. Cordelia entered in an orange jumpsuit, her usual polish stripped away. No designer clothes, no perfectly styled hair, no jewelry. She looked older without her armor, more human. But when her eyes swept the courtroom and landed on Dante, they held only cold fury. Not remorse, not shame, just anger that he'd chosen his wife over his mother. The judge read the charges: attempted murder in the 2nd degree, assault in the 1st degree, criminal possession of a controlled substance. Each word fell like a hammer, building the case against her. Cordelia's lawyer, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, my client maintains her complete innocence. We believe the evidence was mishandled, and the accusations are based on circumstantial coincidence rather than criminal intent." "Circumstantial?" The prosecutor stood. "We have the poison found in the defendant's private kitchen. We have her dosing schedule in her own handwriting. We have medical records showing the victim was systematically poisoned over 6 weeks. And we have testimony from staff that the defendant personally oversaw every meal prepared for the victim." The judge reviewed the evidence summary. Her expression remained neutral, but Dante caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Bail is set at $5 million, the judge announced. The defendant is to surrender her passport and remain within New York State pending trial." $5 million was nothing to the Ashfords. Cordelia would post bail within hours, and return to her mansion like this was nothing more than an inconvenience. The prosecutor had argued for remand without bail, flight risk, danger to the victim, but money had spoken louder. As they led Cordelia out, she turned and looked directly at Dante. Her mouth formed words. "This isn't over." It wasn't a promise. It was a threat. Back at the hospital, Sienna was finally being discharged. Dr. Hollis went through final instructions, while Dante helped pack her few belongings. "Continue the oral chelation medication for another 2 weeks. I want to see you back here in 4 days for blood work and an ultrasound. Any cramping, bleeding, or unusual symptoms, you come straight to the emergency room. Understood?" Sienna nodded. She'd regained some color, but still looked fragile. Like a strong wind might break her. "What about the baby?" Dante asked. "Long-term effects from the poisoning? It's too early to say definitively. The placenta protected the fetus from the worst of it, but we'll monitor development closely. Some studies suggest thallium exposure during pregnancy can cause complications, but every case is different." "Doctor?" Hollis's expression softened. "Try not to catastrophize. Focus on staying healthy and stress-free as much as possible." Stress-free. While Dante's mother was out on bail, and the media circus continued, and a trial loomed ahead, stress-free seemed like a fantasy. They'd barely made it to the car when reporters surrounded them. Cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted from all directions. "Mr. Ashford, did you suspect your mother?" "Mrs. Ashford, how does it feel knowing your mother-in-law tried to kill you? Is it true there's a $50 million trust fund at stake? Dante, will you be testifying against your own mother?" Security guards from the hospital pushed the crowd back while Dante helped Sienna into the car. She kept her head down, one hand protectively over her stomach. Once they were moving, she finally spoke. "I can't go back to the estate. I know it's your home, but I can't be there. Not where she—" Her voice broke. "We're not going back," Dante said. "I've arranged a rental. A house in Westchester, away from the city. Private, secure, somewhere we can breathe without reporters camping outside." The house was beautiful, smaller than the estate, but warm in a way the mansion had never been. Wood floors, big windows, letting in natural light. A garden where things actually grew instead of being maintained by a staff of gardeners. Sienna walked through slowly, touching walls and countertops, like she needed to confirm it was real. "This is perfect." Over the next weeks, they built a new routine. Dante worked from home, taking video calls and reviewing contracts while keeping Sienna within sight. She rested, read, slowly regained her strength. They went to doctor appointments together, holding hands through every ultrasound, every test, every moment of waiting to confirm their baby was okay. The investigation continued. Detective Keller kept them updated, more evidence collected, witnesses interviewed, the case against Cordelia growing stronger. Rosa, the chef, had agreed to testify. She'd been devastated to learn she'd been poisoning Sienna, unknowingly. "I want to help," she told the prosecutor through tears. "I want her to pay for what she made me do." Other staff members came forward with stories of Cordelia's controlling behavior, obsession with maintaining the Ashford image, her fury when Dante had chosen Sienna. It painted a picture of a woman who valued power over everything, including human life. Dante's phone rang constantly with calls from family members, distant cousins and business associates, all trying to understand how Cordelia could do something so terrible. Some believed she was innocent, that the evidence was manufactured. Others wanted distance from the scandal. His uncle, his father's brother, called one evening. "Your mother is many things, Dante. Difficult, controlling, ambitious, but a murderess? I can't believe it." "The evidence doesn't lie," Dante said flatly. "She poisoned Sienna. Systematically. With full knowledge of what she was doing. Maybe she didn't intend." "Don't," Dante's voice went hard. "Don't make excuses for her." She kept a dosing schedule. She measured the poison carefully. She knew exactly what she intended. Silence on the other end. "Then I'm sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you and Sienna. And I'm sorry your mother was capable of it. That was the best anyone could offer." Sorry. Like the word could somehow bandage the wound left by betrayal this deep. 4 months later, Sienna's stomach had grown round with their baby. The ultrasounds showed healthy development despite everything. Their daughter, they'd learned the gender at 20 weeks, was thriving. They'd named her Hope because she represented everything good that had survived the darkness. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks. Cordelia's lawyers had tried every delay tactic possible, but the judge had finally set a firm date. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution was confident, but Dante still worried, because his mother had resources and connections and a lifetime of getting what she wanted through money and manipulation. "She's going to pay for this," Sienna said one evening as they sat in their new living room, her hand on her stomach, where Hope was kicking. "The evidence is too strong. The jury will see what she is." What if they don't? What if her lawyers create reasonable doubt? Then we keep fighting, for as long as it takes. Because Hope deserves to grow up knowing that justice exists, that people who hurt others face consequences. Dante pulled her close, careful of her belly. "I love you. I love you for being strong enough to survive what she did, for fighting for our daughter, for not giving up on us. I love you too. And we're going to be okay. All 3 of us." Outside, autumn was giving way to winter. Leaves fell from trees in the garden. The air turned crisp and cold. And across the city, in her mansion that felt more like a prison, Cordelia Ashford prepared for trial with the same meticulous planning she'd used to poison her daughter-in-law. She still believed she'd done nothing wrong, that protecting the Ashford legacy justified any means necessary, that Sienna was the real villain in this story, the outsider who disrupted everything. The courtroom would decide who was right. The jury would determine whose truth would prevail. And somewhere in between those two realities, a baby kicked in her mother's womb, completely unaware that her existence had sparked attempted murder and would soon spark justice. If this story has moved you, if you believe in fighting for what's right, even when it's family you're fighting against, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment about a time you had to choose between loyalty and truth. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. The trial began on a gray Monday morning in late February. Snow fell lightly outside the courthouse, while inside, lawyers made opening statements that would determine Cordelia Ashford's fate. The prosecution went first. A young attorney named Victoria Chen stood before the jury with quiet confidence. This case is about control, about what happens when someone values power more than human life. You'll hear evidence that the defendant, Cordelia Ashford, systematically poisoned her pregnant daughter-in-law over 6 weeks in an attempt to cause a miscarriage. You'll see the thallium found in her private kitchen. You'll read the dosing schedule written in her own handwriting. You'll hear testimony from medical experts about how close Sienna Ashford came to losing her baby, or her own life. She paused, letting the words sink in. The defendant will try to convince you this was all an accident, a tragic mistake. But the evidence will show you the truth. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was attempted murder. Cordelia's defense attorney stood next. Eleanor Hartwick was known for defending high-profile clients and winning impossible cases. My client is a devoted mother and businesswoman who has spent her life building and protecting her family's legacy. The prosecution wants you to believe she's a monster, but what they'll show you is circumstantial evidence and speculation. Yes, thallium was found in a kitchen my client rarely uses. Yes, there were notes that could be interpreted as a dosing schedule, or could simply be meal planning notations. But where's the proof of intent? Where's the evidence that Cordelia Ashford deliberately tried to harm anyone? She looked each juror in the eye. Reasonable doubt exists everywhere in this case. And that means my client deserves acquittal. The prosecution's case unfolded over 3 weeks. They called Dr. Hollis first, who testified about Sienna's symptoms, the emergency admission, the shocking toxicology results. In my 15 years as an obstetrician, I've never seen thallium poisoning in a pregnant patient. The levels were significant enough to cause severe symptoms and posed real danger to both mother and fetus. Could these levels have occurred accidentally? Victoria Chen asked. Thallium isn't something you encounter in daily life. These levels indicated consistent, repeated exposure over weeks. Detective Keller took the stand next, walking the jury through the investigation. Photos of Cordelia's private kitchen appeared on screens throughout the courtroom. The container of thallium, the false bottom drawer where it was hidden, the notebook with dates and measurements. Can you explain what we're seeing in this notebook? Victoria held up the evidence. These are dates corresponding to meal deliveries to Mrs. Sienna Ashford. Next to each date is a measurement, typically between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams. Below that are notes about symptoms to watch for. Symptoms to watch for. Yes, things like increased nausea, cramping, fatigue. It reads like someone documenting the effects of the poison they were administering. The defense objected repeatedly, arguing the notebook could mean anything. But the dates matched. The symptoms matched. The evidence painted a clear picture. Rosa, the chef, cried through her entire testimony. Mrs. Ashford told me they were special supplements. She said the young Mrs. Ashford needed extra nutrition for the pregnancy. I trusted her. I never would have. Her voice broke. I never would have hurt anyone intentionally. Did Mrs. Cordelia Ashford personally oversee the addition of these supplements to the meals every single time? She'd watch to make sure I measured correctly. She was very particular about it. The defense tried to discredit Rosa during cross-examination, suggested she might have her own reasons to lie. But her grief seemed genuine, and the jury appeared sympathetic. Then came Sienna's turn to testify. She walked to the stand slowly, one hand on her now visible pregnancy. At 7 months, Hope's presence was undeniable. Sienna wore a simple blue dress and no jewelry, except her wedding ring. She looked directly at Cordelia as she was sworn in. Cordelia stared back with cold indifference. Victoria Chen approached gently. Mrs. Ashford, can you describe your relationship with your mother-in-law before the poisoning? Difficult. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't approve of me marrying Dante. I wasn't from the right social class, didn't have the proper background. She criticized everything about me. Did that change when you became pregnant? At first, I thought it did. She offered to help with meals and nutrition. I thought maybe the baby would bring us together. Sienna's voice wavered slightly. I was wrong. When did you first suspect something was wrong? After a few weeks of accepting the meals she sent, I started feeling terrible, worse than normal pregnancy symptoms, and I noticed the pattern. I always felt worse after consuming what she sent over. Did you mention this to anyone? I tried. I told Dante, told my doctor, but the tests kept coming back normal, so everyone thought I was just having a difficult pregnancy. I started to doubt myself. Thought maybe I was being paranoid. When did you discover you were being poisoned? When I woke up in the hospital, and Dr. Hollis told me they'd found thallium in my blood work. Tears ran down Sienna's face now. She told me someone had been systematically poisoning me, that if I hadn't collapsed when I did, I might have lost the baby, or died. Victoria let the emotion hang in the air for a moment. Then, Mrs. Ashford, how has this affected you? I have nightmares. I'm terrified every day that something will still be wrong with my baby because of what was done to us. I can't trust people anymore. And I lost. Her voice broke. I lost any hope of having a real family. Because the woman who should have loved my child tried to kill her. The courtroom was silent, except for Sienna's quiet crying. Several jurors had tears in their eyes. Eleanor Hartwick's cross-examination was aggressive. She tried to suggest Sienna had been exposed to thallium elsewhere. Maybe at her non-profit work, maybe through contaminated water or food from other sources. But Sienna held firm. The pattern was clear. I only felt worse after consuming what Cordelia sent, and the dosing schedule found in her kitchen matched exactly when I experienced the worst symptoms. You admit you disliked my client? I admit she made it clear she disliked me. Isn't it possible you're using this situation to frame her, to remove her from your husband's life permanently? Sienna looked at Eleanor with something like pity. I almost died. My baby almost died. Why would I frame anyone when the real poisoner could strike again? I want the person who did this held accountable. And all the evidence points to one person. Dante testified next, his voice hollow, as he described watching his wife deteriorate. Finding her collapsed. The horrible realization that his own mother had done this. Do you believe your mother intended to harm your wife? Victoria asked. Yes, the evidence makes that clear. But more than that, I know my mother. I know how she values control and status above everything else. Sienna threatened that control. The baby would cement Sienna's place in the family permanently. My mother couldn't allow that. The defense called their own experts, toxicologists who suggested the thallium could have come from anywhere. Psychologists who testified that Cordelia showed no signs of murderous intent. Character witnesses who painted her as a devoted mother and philanthropist. But the prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. They showed that thallium wasn't available in any products Sienna would have encountered, that the dosing schedule was too specific, too detailed, to be anything but deliberate, that Cordelia had means, motive, and opportunity, the trifecta of guilt. The trial lasted 6 weeks total. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Dante and Sienna sat in the front row, holding hands so tight their knuckles were white. Cordelia sat at the defense table, her face a mask of composure. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the count of attempted murder in the 2nd degree, how do you find? The jury foreperson stood. Guilty, Sienna gasped. Dante closed his eyes. Something that looked like grief and relief warring on his face. On the count of assault? In the 1st degree? Guilty. Cordelia's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched into fists on the table. The judge set sentencing for 4 weeks later. As they led Cordelia away, she finally looked at Dante. For just a moment, her mask slipped. He saw something in her eyes, not remorse, but loss. The realization that she'd destroyed her relationship with her son forever for the sake of control. Then she was gone, led back to Holding to await her sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dante made a brief statement. Justice was served today, not just for my wife and daughter, but for everyone who's ever been abused by someone who claimed to love them. My mother made her choices. Now she'll face the consequences. He didn't take questions, just led Sienna through the crowd to their waiting car. That night, in their quiet house in Westchester, they held each other while hope kicked between them. They didn't celebrate, didn't feel victorious, just exhausted and sad, and relieved that the nightmare had finally reached some kind of resolution. She'll appeal, Sienna said quietly. Probably, but the evidence was overwhelming. The appeals will fail, and then we move forward. We raise our daughter. We build the life she tried to destroy. Sienna pressed her face against Dante's chest. I wish it had ended differently. I wish she'd been capable of change. Me too. But she wasn't. And we can't save people who don't want to be saved. 4 weeks later, Cordelia Ashford was sentenced to 15 years in prison. No parole eligibility for at least 10 years. The judge's words were harsh and uncompromising. You violated the most basic trust that exists. Family. You used your position of power and influence not to protect, but to destroy. Your actions endangered 2 innocent lives, one of them your own grandchild. This court finds no mitigating factors that would justify leniency. Cordelia showed no emotion as they led her away. Didn't look at Dante. Didn't acknowledge Sienna. Just walked out of the courtroom with the same cold composure she'd maintained throughout. Some people never broke, never admitted wrongdoing, never faced what they really were. Cordelia Ashford was one of those people, and Dante and Sienna had to accept that and find a way to move forward anyway. Spring came to Westchester with an explosion of color. Cherry blossoms lined their street, and the garden Sienna had started planting burst into life. Hope was born on a warm April morning, weighing 7 pounds and absolutely perfect. The doctors found no lasting effects from the thallium exposure. Their daughter was healthy, strong, screaming with impressive lung power as she entered the world. Dante cried when he held her for the first time. She's perfect. You're both perfect. Sienna, exhausted and radiant, smiled. We made it. Against everything. We made it. They named her Hope, Cordelia Ashford, not to honor Dante's mother, but to reclaim the name, to prove that even something touched by darkness could be transformed into light. The media coverage eventually faded. Other scandals captured public attention. The Ashford poisoning case became a cautionary tale people referenced, but didn't obsess over anymore. Dante transformed Ashford Technologies. He sold the Manhattan estate, couldn't bear to set foot in it again, and donated half the proceeds to organizations supporting domestic violence victims. The other half went into a trust for hope. He restructured the company to focus on ethical practices and charitable initiatives, used his platform to speak openly about family abuse and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. No amount of money or status excuses abuse. He said in a speech that went viral, I grew up believing family loyalty was everything. But I learned that true loyalty means protecting the innocent, even when the perpetrator is someone you love. Especially then, Sienna returned to nonprofit work, but with a new focus. She started a foundation called Hope's Light, dedicated to helping women who'd been victimized by family members. They provided legal support, counseling, safe housing, and most importantly, belief. Belief that their stories mattered, that their instincts were valid, that they deserved protection and justice. Too many people are told to ignore their gut feelings, Sienna told reporters at the foundation's launch. To give family members the benefit of the doubt, even when every instinct screams danger. I almost died because I didn't trust myself. No one else should have to learn that lesson the way I did. The foundation helped hundreds of women in its first year alone. Women who'd been gaslighted, manipulated, harmed by people who should have loved them. Women who needed someone to say, I believe you. It wasn't your fault. You deserve better. Hope grew into a bright, curious toddler with Dante's eyes and Sienna's spirit. She had no memory of the darkness that preceded her birth, but her parents would tell her the story when she was old enough, not to traumatize her, but to teach her important truths. That love means protection, never harm. That family is defined by behavior, not blood. That trusting your instincts can save your life. That justice exists, even when it's hard-won. Dante never visited Cordelia in prison. She wrote letters at first, pages attempting to justify her actions, to explain that she'd only wanted what was best for him. The letters went unanswered and eventually stopped coming. Some relationships, once broken, couldn't be repaired. Some betrayals went too deep for forgiveness, and that was okay. Protecting yourself and your family sometimes meant walking away permanently from people who'd proven themselves dangerous. One evening, when Hope was 2 years old, Sienna found Dante standing at their bedroom window, staring out at nothing. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "My mother," wondering if she ever realized what she lost. If she understands that her need for control cost her everything that actually mattered. Does it matter if she understands? Dante considered. No, I guess it doesn't. We can't save people from their own choices. We can only make sure those choices don't destroy us too. Sienna wrapped her arms around him from behind. We built something beautiful from that nightmare. Hope, this life, the foundation helping others. She tried to destroy us, and instead created something that's helping hundreds of people. Poetic justice? Something like that. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to Hope singing to herself in her room down the hall. Dante thought about the painting where he'd first met Sienna, two people choosing each other despite the storm raging around them. They'd survived their storm. More than survived, they'd emerged stronger, wiser, more committed to protecting others from similar nightmares. Years passed. Hope started school, made friends, learned about the world with wide-eyed wonder. She knew her grandmother was in prison, but didn't fully understand why. That conversation would come later, when she was ready. The foundation continued growing. Sienna spoke at conferences, trained counselors, worked with legislators on better protections for abuse victims. Her story became a powerful tool for change, proof that abuse could happen anywhere, to anyone, and that speaking up saved lives. Dante used his business success to fund research into domestic abuse prevention and intervention. The Ashford name, once associated with scandal and attempted murder, slowly transformed into something associated with justice and healing. When Hope was 5, they sold the Westchester house and bought a farm upstate. Space to grow, to breathe, to let Hope run and play without the weight of their past pressing down. They planted a garden together, tomatoes and peppers and flowers that Hope chose herself, adopted rescue dogs that followed Hope everywhere, built a life defined by love and laughter and the daily choice to be better than what had tried to break them. Cordelia was released after serving 10 years for good behavior. She moved to Europe, far from the scandal that had destroyed her reputation. She never reached out to Dante or attempted to meet her granddaughter. Some stories didn't get happy endings for everyone. Some people chose pride over redemption, control over connection, and the people they'd hurt had to find peace with that. On Hope's 6th birthday, they had a party in the garden. Friends from school, neighbors from the farm community, colleagues from Dante's company and Sienna's foundation. Laughter filled the air, along with the smell of grilled food and birthday cake. Dante watched his daughter blow out her candles, her face bright with joy. Sienna stood beside him, her hand in his. "We made it," she whispered. "We did more than make it. We turned poison into purpose, betrayal into something beautiful." Later, after the party ended and Hope was asleep, Dante and Sienna sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the evening darkness. "Do you think about her?" Sienna asked. "Your mother?" "Sometimes. Not as much anymore. Mostly, I think about what we built despite her, about how Hope will grow up, knowing that family means safety, not danger, that the people who love you protect you, or they don't really love you at all. Those are good lessons, the best lessons, the ones we learned the hard way. The story of the Ashford poisoning became more than just a scandal. It became a teaching moment, a reminder that abuse wears many faces, that wealth and status don't equal safety, that trusting your instincts can literally save your life. Medical professionals started screening more carefully for unusual symptoms in pregnant patients. Police departments improved their training on family-perpetrated abuse. Prosecutors used the case as a blueprint for pursuing charges against wealthy, powerful abusers who thought they were untouchable. Change happened slowly, but it happened. Because Sienna had trusted her gut, because Dante had chosen his wife over his mother, because Dr. Hollis had run that toxicology screen, because Detective Keller had built an airtight case, because a jury had looked past wealth and status to see the truth. Justice wasn't always swift. It wasn't always perfect. But sometimes, when enough people refused to look away, it prevailed. The shocking toxicology tests that exposed Cordelia's crimes had saved more than just Sienna and Hope's lives. They'd exposed a truth the world needed to hear. That monsters don't always look like monsters. That family members can be predators. That speaking up, no matter how difficult, is always the right choice. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to demand justice, even when it costs you everything you thought you knew about family. Years later, when Hope was old enough to understand, they sat her down and told her the story, not to frighten her, but to empower her, to teach her that her gut feelings mattered, that no one, no matter who they were, had the right to hurt her, that love meant protection, or it wasn't really love at all. Hope listened with serious eyes. When they finished, she thought for a long moment. So Grandma Cordelia was sick. Like, in her brain? In a way, Sienna said carefully. She valued the wrong things. Power instead of people. Control instead of connection. That made her mean. That made her dangerous. There's a difference. I'm glad you're my mommy and daddy, Hope said, climbing into their laps for a hug. You would never hurt me. Never, Dante said fiercely. That's a promise. Family protects. Always. As Hope ran off to play, Dante and Sienna exchanged a look that held years of pain and healing. They'd survived the unsurvivable. Built a life from ashes. Turned tragedy into purpose. The sun set over their farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere far away, Cordelia lived with her choices. But here, in this home built on love and truth, her victims thrived. They'd won, not by destroying her. That would have meant letting hate win. They'd won by refusing to let what she'd done define them, by choosing healing over bitterness, by building something beautiful where she'd tried to plant destruction. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but resilience. Not hatred, but hope. And in the end, their story became exactly what the world needed. Proof that even when family betrays you, even when poison flows through your veins, even when the person who should love you most wants you dead, you can survive. You can heal. You can build something beautiful from the broken pieces. If this story moved you, if you learned something about trusting your instincts or protecting yourself from toxic people, drop a comment below. Tell us what lesson you're taking from Sienna and Dante's journey. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about resilience, justice, and the Power of choosing yourself over toxic family loyalty. And remember, real love protects. Real family respects. Your instincts are worth trusting. This is American Lore Chronicles TV, reminding you that justice may be delayed, but truth always finds the light.